Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The career of Jarrell Miller is in complete tatters after it was announced he's failed a second doping test. He had been scheduled to fight Anthony Joshua on June 1st, but that is now not happening. Any slim chance he was going to fight Joshua if his first failed sample cleared a B test, well, that's gone now with this failing of a second test. So this is for a separate substance. So what we're going to do is get to the news, some of the reaction, and then on to a bit of the what next, because there's been a little bit of movement on the opponent front. The opponent for Anthony Joshua for June 1st will be next week. So buckle in. Let's go. So starting off with Eddie Hearn confirming on social media, we have now received news from VADA that Jarrell Miller has now failed a second separate test for a further substance. AJ's June 1 opponent will be announced next week. If you don't think you can beat him clean, then delete my number. Now, going to ESPN's reportage of this, the results from a blood sample collected from Miller by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency Association on March 31 came to light on Friday and were positive for human growth hormone, which is on the World Anti-Doping Agency banned list. There's a statement here from Dimitri Salita and Greg Cohen. They co-promote Jarrell Miller. Salita Promotions and Greg Cohen Promotions are very disappointed in these findings and feel awful fight fans will be deprived of what would have been a great fight. It's a terrible outcome and an unfortunate situation for all parties involved. Not least Miller, he's just missing out on millions and millions of dollars, of which Salita and Cohen will not be getting a cut of. And scrolling down here, Hearn says, "To be honest, I can't believe it. You always want to give an athlete the benefit of the doubt, but this leaves no doubt. It worries me that fighters feel the only way that they can beat AJ is taking banned substances. One thing we know is Miller is out. AJ's next opponent for June 1 will be announced next week. Clean fighters only need apply." Then it goes on to talk about HGH, which is usually given by injection, is used by athletes to increase lean muscle mass and also help in recovery. It is not detectable by a urine test, but blood testing has been developed in recent years to find it. It is also a substance that typically remains in humans for only about 24 hours. After his first positive test, Miller claimed he had not knowingly taken a banned substance. And then it goes on to go through his recent statement after the first failed test, and that was for a substance which would have increased his stamina and also his fat-burning capability. And I think it's called Endurable from memory. And the story notes, it is Miller's third positive test in his combat sports career. He failed a drug test back in 2014, and now he's missing out on millions and millions of dollars. As many people have pointed out, he had the winning lottery ticket, and obviously he hasn't been able to cash it in because he's just face-palmed here. And I guess it goes to show that this rigorous testing that Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua have in place for Joshua's fights, this extra testing from VADA, it proves why this is a necessary thing to sort of flush out some of these drug cheats, because one test, which, you can wait on the B sample, that is, explainable to some degree, but two tests in a very short amount of time. Obviously, this was random testing. Miller must have been engaged in some practices of some sort to try gain an advantage here by cheating, and he's been found out. So Jarrell Miller is a drugs cheat. We can all sort of move on from this fight now, because Miller has really shot himself in the foot by shooting himself up with whatever he's put in his system here. Also, in a separate article, Eddie Hearn says, "To have a second one is disgusting. The sport can have no room for this," he said to the Daily Mail. "In a way, I'm happy it shows the VADA testing works and we have kept him out of the ring. AJ will face any clean fighters and beat him." And I do second that. As I said, the rigorous drug testing has proved its worth here. And for Anthony Joshua, who was obviously an elite level fighter with multiple belts, all that sort of thing, this really is protecting him and what he is building. So guys like Jarrell Miller, no doubt he is going to be out of the sport for some time now when a punishment is handed down. So we will have to see what happens with Miller, but I guess he will become yesterday's news pretty quickly. But it highlights that drugs are rife in elite level boxing, and Miller won't be the only one in the heavyweight division that is juicing. I don't think we can be naive about this. There are other guys who will be cycling on stuff and dirty, but I guess if they're going to be facing Anthony Joshua, as we've seen with this, they will be caught. So a guy who has reacted to this is Tyson Fury's father. John Fury. He says, "I could have told you months ago Big Baby Miller was a drug cheat. He should be banned from boxing for life, also fined in order to pay Eddie Hearn compensation to pay the fans who paid good honest money to go to the USA. This fat MF should never box again." And I think there will be some reticence from fans and others to now accept Jarrell Miller's story that he was innocent and this was somehow something that had happened inadvertently. He said he'd never knowingly taken any performance-enhancing substance, but 2 failed tests in a very short amount of time. It was the random testing that he was surprised on his doorstep. He had to either, blood sample or urine test, and clearly it has worked and picked him up and confirmed he is a drugs cheat. So now if we get on to a bit of the what next. So Eddie Hearn confirmed that he has spoken to the manager of Luis Ortiz, but it's not looking good for a Luis Ortiz fight. This is the fighter Anthony Joshua has at the top of his list, Luis Ortiz. Hearn says, "Luis Ortiz was one of the first people that I spoke to actually. His manager, a guy called Jay Jimenez, who we've worked with before. He told me it was too short notice. I disagreed with him, but they are going to be speaking to their fighter. I think the Luis Ortiz fight is a great fight, and he has been promised the Deontay Wilder fight as well by his team, which is a bit worrying for us to hear that news. I'm not sure if Ortiz is going to be the guy. Like I said, everyone has been calling." And we'll get to the everyone has been calling bit a bit later on, but just this news on Luis Ortiz, it's a little bit worrying to hear because with these statements that it's a bit too short notice, it does make me think about the 2017 instance where Deontay Wilder was meant to face Andres Wawrzyk, and that was about 5 weeks to go to the fight where that was announced that that would be called off. And up steps Luis Ortiz, along with a number of other fighters, to challenge Deontay Wilder. So this is not the stuff that happened in 2018. Don't be confused with this. This was a year and a half earlier where Deontay Wilder was due to face Andres Wawrzyk on February 25th. Wawrzyk pops dirty for in a drugs test, and Ortiz, at about a month's notice, 5 weeks, says he would step into the ring. So it wasn't too short notice then, but now apparently having slightly longer time is. And it does run counter to some of the statements that have been made in recent months by his trainer like Herman Caicedo, who had actually said Luis Ortiz has never stopped working out since the loss to Deontay Wilder, that he's been staying in the gym, staying ready for an opportunity. And obviously many thought it may come against Deontay Wilder in a rematch, but now it looks like this gift opportunity through Jarrell Miller's sheer stupidity will give Ortiz a shot at a title and millions of dollars. But will promotional ties, because he is signed with the PBC and advisor Al Heyman, will this prevent him from fighting Joshua? Because I think at the moment, on the outside looking it in, there looks to be nothing that should stop him. And the whole thing about the time, if he really wants the fight and the opportunity to face Joshua, who he has previously said he'd almost fight for any money, well, the opportunity is there for him to grab with both hands. They are offering it to him. But perhaps this is a negotiation tactic too. From some of the conflicting statements and reports that have been online and different social media platforms, some of this could come down to the purse. But it would be likely that he would get whatever Miller was getting, which is reported to be, several $1 million, somewhere between, I think ESPN reported it to be about $4.8 million US, then plus some pay-per-view money from the UK. There have been other reports suggesting that it was about $7 million US, and there has been some statements that Luis Ortiz wants $10 million, but hard to know what's what right now, but he has until next week to make a decision. And if he doesn't want the fight, well, they will just move on. And the clear favourite that it seems to be emerging from some of the options that have been around is Michael Hunter. So if Luis Ortiz doesn't want it, Michael Hunter, a former cruiserweight who moved up to heavyweight a year ago, has had 4 fights, most recently beat Alexander Ustinov, and then prior to that upset Martin Bakole. He could be Johnny on the spot. He recently signed with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom USA. He obviously had a little bit of a relationship there through the Ustinov fight, but now being in the tent, being a DAZN fighter, he could obviously find himself fighting for 3 belts. This could be very serendipitous for Michael Hunter. We will have to see, but Deontay Wilder has weighed in on this as well. So he told AB Boxing News, out of all those guys, Luis Ortiz would be the man who'd be ready. Luis Ortiz always trains, and this is what I was talking about before. This is what we've heard over several months, that Ortiz has been staying ready for a shot in case one came up. But now it sort of seems to be that other things may be a stumbling block, but we have to see where this goes. After my fight, he stayed training. He stayed doing something. He stayed waiting on that call. People want to talk about his last performance. Yeah. We all have an off day. We all can't be perfect, even the best of us. And then he goes on to have a bit of a dig at Jarrell Miller. I'm disappointed because he let his family down. He let his kids down. He let a life-changing opportunity slip through his hands. And that's what I'm mostly disappointed in, because of the family. He talked about how he came up and living with the roaches and having to add water to milk, just like a lot of our culture who have to go through the same thing. But when you get this opportunity, you hold this opportunity dear. The things that you know are going to get you in trouble, you don't do it. This man, with the opportunity he had to make the money he was going to make, I wouldn't have been taking nothing. I would have been drinking mother effing water. Win, lose or draw, he was going to get this money, and it was life-changing money. No one was expecting him to beat Joshua anyway. And then asked if he would give Miller a second chance. Hell no. I don't know what this is going to happen to him. He's not a likable guy in boxing anyway. The people in boxing, the business side of boxing, don't like Jarrell Miller because how he carries himself, the things he says, a lot of people are happy this happened to him. Well, I mean, I'm not sure people are happy it's happened to him. I think people are angry that he's done this, and obviously share stupidity from Jarrell Miller. But this has opened up the gate to someone else to fight Anthony Joshua. As I covered in recent videos, you've had a slew of names, including Michael Hunter, Joseph Parker, a whole myriad of guys coming forward. And every day that's passing now since this first failed test, more guys have been putting their name forward. Otto Wallen, who is another one, is saying that he lives in New York now. He's the Swedish fringe contender. Used to spar Anthony Joshua close to 200 rounds, he says, and that was before he won his first title. He says he's ready to step in as Jarrell Miller's replacement. We've also had Jermaine Franklin, and this is interesting because he just had a fight the other week. Wasn't a great performance, but he says there's a buzz in the boxing industry for me to consider this fight if the offer came. Well, it must be, deep inside boxing industry sources or whatever, because I think from a fan perspective, he is not in the mix at all. Manuel Char, he is continuing his crusade to try and get this fight. The WBA regular champion, who's inactive right now, he's saying, AJ, I am here and waiting for you. He's outside Madison Square Garden. Let's find out who the true WBA heavyweight champion of the world is. No thanks. Do not want or need to see that fight with Manuel Char. Zero credit for Joshua there. One of the more hilarious call-outs has been from serial protagonist Christopher Lovejoy, who just harasses people on social media to try get recognition in fights and build profile. Literally, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... just 6 posts in the last 2 days calling out Anthony Joshua with a number of taunts and all that sort of stuff. Another one who's been suggested as a potential opponent is a New Zealander, Junior Farr. So this is from the New Zealand media. They've asked him about this. He has actually addressed it on his Instagram, saying if the opportunity came, he would, gladly take it. He's currently in the United States training with Deontay Wilder, helping him prepare for his fight on May 18th with Dominic Breazeale. So he is in camp with Wilder right now. But all of these options to me do kind of seem like, they're not really fights that fans would want to see. These boxers would snap off Anthony Joshua's hand to take the opportunity in the millions of dollars. But from an entertainment standpoint, all of those guys have not done enough for me to get a fight with Joshua. So it really is coming down to a small pool of opponents. And someone like Dillian White says he's wanting to take the fight, but is that a real call-out? Is that a real sort of, I'll take the fight, because he wanted a longer camp, longer drug testing, he wanted certain things in the contract for rematches, other things. Can they negotiate that in a couple of days? It feels unlikely. Luis Ortiz, who knows where that will go? But if it ends up being Michael Hunter, that's not a terrible fight, but it's also not a fight that many fans would really necessarily like to see. Sure, it's an in-house fight and it's easy to make. Hunter would snap off Anthony Joshua's hand and Eddie Hearn's hand to make that fight. But he is a former blown-up cruiserweight who's only been at heavyweight for a year. He's had a couple of fights, one eye-catching win, the other was against an overmatched Alexander Ustinov who was faded beyond belief. It's not going to satisfy everyone. And yeah, there is a point in this process where they have to weigh all this up and go, can we actually fight this guy? Is this actually adding to Anthony Joshua's legacy, or does this hurt it? And Joshua's in the unenviable position here because he knows that he's got to go through with this date, and the level of opponent has to be such for fans to believe it's a credible fight. Hunter ticks some of the boxes, but maybe not all. But maybe that will be the option that he's left with. We have to consider that. It's not perfect here, and you have to cut Joshua and Hearn some slack here because clearly Miller has really put them in the poo here. So, yeah, we'll have to see where this goes. But an opponent for Joshua will be announced next week. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.